In today's video, I mix acrylic paint, enamel paint, oil paint, metallic paint and, as usual, disgusting mud. Hello fellow modelers! I want to create another diorama, and the first step or component is this lovely tiny Stuart. It contains small parts, so it is recommended not to eat it, but it's easy to be confused. The kit itself is in 72 scale and made by small company Mirage hobby. I never built anything from them, so I was a little bit skeptical about the quality and fitting. But I was pleasantly surprised. This kit has very nice details. Funny is that I also have a Stuart from Academy in 35 scale, and this kit has almost the same number of parts, so it's going to be fun indeed. The tank body is prepared for different Stuart versions, so if you are a beginner, it could be relatively complicated to assemble all the parts. The parts are molded from soft grey plastic, so it is easy to separate them out of the sprue. As you can see, the fitting is perfect, and you must be only cautious about details around seam lines. Therefore I use for gluing super thin glue. The application is straightforward, and you don't need to worry about tiny plastic rivets. There is a small gap between body and chassis, so you must apply more glue than you are used to. Then correct position by Stuart blueprints, because it is easy to glue the chassis obliquely. Drive wheels have a mold runner which exceeds Thieves. It could be again difficult to remove excess plastic without damaging parts. Therefore I am drilling out the hole with a micro drill bit and correcting shape with a sharp bobby blade. The Stuart has only a few wheels, so removing mold lines is not as painful as with a Panther or Tiger tanks. I told you the gap is relatively large, so good practice is to make the seam line stronger with a flexible super glue, and then you can cover gap with a putty for plastic. The flexible super glue prevents cracking of the joint. A few parts have ugly deep sink marks, so you must fill them with a putty as well. The disadvantage is that with this process you will destroy some details. Probably. At least I do. If you are painstaking, you can after filling and gluing rescribe some lines. I use for this purpose razor saw, but you can use sharp bobby blade as well. I check out few historical photos and blueprints and decided that I need to create some well lines, which are missing. I use an easy technique which is perfect for the scale. You probably have some old plastic sprues from previous projects. Try to find some narrow line and heat plastic with a lighter. When it becomes flexible, you can pull out thin plastic string. The rest is straightforward. I am gluing strings with a thin glue according to photos and blueprints. It is hard to paint lights realistic, therefore it is easier to drill out small hole inside and create lens from clear epoxy putty. And a small recommendation: try to drill out lights that are still in the sprue, because they are very small. Another quite tricky part is to glue all spare Tantrex links symmetrically, because there are no markings where to place them. This kit feels like some old Perfect Dragon kits, but this one is for a third of the price. The ammo box is not included in the kit. I use spare parts from Airfix Jeep. Funny is that I accidentally somewhere lost left edge. Probably throw it into the garbage meanwhile cleaning. It's all me. Luckily I have some casting skills and duplicated the right one from Resin. If you want to know how to create molds and resin casting, you can check out my video tutorials. You can find a link in the video description. I prefer to add on the models cargo, like boxes, spare wheels or cloth. I have a few boxes with resin accessories from Black Dog and plastic from old models. You can also use some spare parts which are usually in the kit. For example, this wheel is for older Stuart version, but it has nice details, so it would be shame not to use it. And do not worry, the historical documentation is improving it to use it for the late Stuart version. I told you I like accessories, and no, it is not too much. So more details. If you are observant, you can notice small rivets on the side of the tank. I use my circle puncher and styrene plastic board. I am capable of making a minimal 0.5 mm in size, but in this case I think this diameter is okay. Half of the millimeter is really tiny. The kit has photo etch parts for lights, but they are small and do not fit properly. They should be a little bit taller, therefore I'm making new ones. You can sometimes use material which is intended only like waste, like this tiny little strip. I noticed modest photo reference in the manual, and you can see that almost all Stuarts are without side fenders, so I do not use them as well. I made a few minor improvements and added resin accessories, so good practice is to unify the whole model with a primer. And after the primer, I noticed some details. For example, the top turret hatch is too thick in my opinion. In this scale, thick means everything over half of a millimeter. And as you can see, the hatch has 1 mm. The major problem is that the details are from the both sides, and I want to preserve them. I am capable to make 0.3 or rather 0.4 mm cut with a razor saw, so easy peasy, and the result looks much better. I filled sink marks at the beginning and removed some rivets around in the process. One of the last steps before painting is to create a weld texture with a rough sandpaper. The process is straightforward, just be careful not to scratch flat parts or details around. I am sharing on my Instagram account incoming projects, like this one. I think the photo nicely covers the size of the whole model. Anyway, I am talking about it because you wrote me in nice comments about improvements which I forgot to perform. The major help was the idea about drilling out gun barrels. I do not have such small drill bits, so I used instead of new hypodermic needle. If plastic is soft, you can use it like a drill bit, only difficult is to hit the center. Anyway, let's paint this lovely model. I use acrylic lacquer paints from AK, but you can freely use Tamiya or Mr. Color or any other brand you like. I have specific dark olive green for US Army, but it is mixed for larger scale, so you can use it also for this model, but in the end it will be very dark. If you want to mix lighter green shade, then do not use white paint. It will kill the shade. You can try instead some beige or light yellow shades. If you want to achieve a sharp color contrast with an airbrush, you can use paper boards like a template. This is how the model looks like after basic shading. And do not worry that it is too bright, it is only the first step. In the process you can paint rubber tantracks. The base layer is dark brown and the links plates you can paint with a rubber black. The weathering and more shading I will make later. The kit has some water slide decals, and before you apply them on the surface, it is good to cover surface with 1 or 2 layers of a clear varnish. If you want to apply large US Army Star decal on the turret, then you must use some Decal's chemicals. And then, after a few hours, protect the whole model again with another layer of varnish. But this time you can use matte. Basically, the oil paints and other weathering steps will adhere to the matte surface better than on gloss. Now I'm showing you what you can do with the oil paints. You can use them as a wash, which makes small details and texture more pronounced. You can easily see the effect on the weld lines. You can use for diluting oil paints a few types of thinners, like enamel thinner, odorless thinner, white spirit, or other special thinners for oil painting. I got used to white spirit because it is nicely soft. The black is not good for shading, but it is perfect for deep details, so do not worry to use it also. The drying time of oil paints is more or less 2 days, and even after that you can wipe out excess color with a thinner or dry cotton swab. I'm not expert with airbrush techniques, therefore the final shading I always do with a paintbrush, especially in this scale. You have a better control, thus you can apply paint in the direct place. If you have a good quality oil paints with a full opacity and matte surface, then you will be capable to make super smooth layer and transition. You will hardly recognize that shading is not painted with an airbrush. You can protect the result with another layer of a matte varnish, but it is not a necessity. I like model weathering. It means I make the model looks like after some use or combat deployment. You can start with tiny scratches. This process looks time consuming, but on this scale you can do it relatively fast. I'm painting some random sketches with a sponge on flat parts or edges. And some lengthwise scratches from bushes. As you can see, the chassis looks very clean, so it's time for some matte. You can mix it at home from sawdust, plaster, dry pigment, PVA glue and water. So why these components? The sawdust creates a nice rough texture, the dry pigment is for matte color shade, plaster is a main binder, PVA glue will fix the result so it wouldn't crumble, and water is for proper mixing of all components and activating the plaster chemical reaction. I use the same mix for my diorama models, so you are probably already know it. In addition, you can add some dry roots or grass. The tank is without fenders, so let's make some happy accumulated mud in the back. I decided to assemble ton tracks after the matte application, and I think it was a good idea, otherwise it would be hard to make them clean and not filled with matte. You can clean excess matte with ordinary water, especially on the wheels. The uniform layer of matte is interesting but dull, therefore I'm mixing dark brown enamel paint and make some random splatters. With this technique, the matte will look wet and fresh. And do not forget to cover the model with a masking tape, you will save a lot of time with cleaning it. The matte looks quite realistic, And the best is that you don't need some expensive weathering products. In 72 scale it is not a big deal, because you usually need only a small amount of it. But you can imagine how much material you would need in 35 or even larger scale. Now I'm painting more aggressive shading and oil leaks with a very dark brown oil paint. It means almost black. I recently started watching figures painting tutorials and realized that I quite underestimated the dry brush techniques. So I'm trying to change that. Basically, you moisten the brush into the paint and then remove excess color from fibers with a paper napkin. If you cross over the edges on the model, the small amount of almost dry paint from fibers will stick on the details and create this way nice soft highlights. I don't have a lot of US Army accessories, but this tank will be in the diorama from the end of World War II, so why not make a collection of confiscated German guns? So in the box you can find 75mm shell, Panzerfaust, MP38, 44 and more German loot. Because I like figures, I painted this lovely 72 scale resin tank commander and one soldier. They are only 2 cm tall, so it was quite fun to paint them a little bit realistic. The tanks alone are nice, but the figures nicely bring a little bit life to it. I have some video footage from the painting process, so I will probably make one bonus video. You can write me a comment if you want to. The boxes on the model I glue with a super glue, but in real life were attached to the tank body with ropes. I like for this purpose thin lead or thin wires, because they are super flexible and you can easily shape them. And more details with oil paints. In the back section are fuel tanks, so you can paint some fuel leaks, for example. And more leaks on the bottom of the tank. And that is all. What I like about this project are the figures and the very compact size of the whole model. I have an idea about diorama which includes destroyed German Panther, so see these 2 tanks side by side is with it. I also have a new 3D printer, so you can looking forward to future projects. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Here is the finished model.